I want a signing bonus of over $1 million. So I said the lowest I'm going to go is $1 million. And so right off the top, by the way, looking back, what horrendous negotiating skills on my end, TiVo. I'm just like, they say, hey, listen, we'd like for you to go under. And my first thought is, let's shave off $500,000. Like, what a ridiculous thing to say. So, but I was like, yeah, I'll do $1 million. And they're like, okay, yeah, we're thinking about taking you there. I was like, okay. And then they selected a now good friend of mine, Brian Johnson, at 31. They didn't take me there. Right after the 31st pick, they call my agent again, and my agent calls me back. And he goes, hey, listen, they're thinking about taking at 37 now. You know, what's the number? Is it still $1 million? Now at 37, I believe the slot was like 1.3. And I said, yeah, I'm staying at $1 million. And so at least I have something there. I didn't go further down now that we're further later in the draft. But I said, again, I'm staying at $1 million. And then like 2 picks later, they're like, okay, if you make it, we're going to take you there. And we knew we'd probably make it there because no other team was calling in between there. And so they ended up selecting me at 37. I signed for $1 million. We all live happily ever after. Fast forward now, 2 months later, my agent at that time now, same guy through the draft, who, to be clear, I was very happy with. You know, we signed for $1 million. I was a first-round draft pick. It's a chess match. Do I think we may have lost a chess match, which I'll let you in on a secret here afterwards? Maybe, but still, it's a chess match. You win some, you lose some. It is what it is. My agent then, it was at a small agency, which I liked at the time, decides to leave for this, you know, larger company. And I had the feeling, since I was his only high draft pick at the time, I had a feeling that he was leveraging possibly my ability to go make money at the big league level, which is where agents make a lot more money, to leave for a bigger company. He was kind of trying to, he's like, hey, listen, I'll bring Pat with me and we'll get into this new, larger company. And I didn't particularly care for this guy. He wasn't a bad guy, so to speak. When I met him, he was a nice enough fella. I don't remember his name. Oh, maybe I do. Maybe Dan Lozano. Maybe it's Dan. I don't remember. Something along those words. But he had just had a little bit of a scandal in the industry, in the news, about some things coming out with women. I don't remember exactly what it was, but he had a little bit of a scandal, and we didn't quite care for that at the time. For as a guy that was going to go into front offices and represent me, we didn't necessarily care for those types of things to be out there about the guy. And so we weren't really sure what we were going to do. And I was actually sitting in the stands in Brooklyn playing against the Cyclones. And a guy in front of me had said, hey, listen, what did you, sometimes there's a lot of scouts, sometimes there's agents there all doing the radar gun, tracking guys, tracking pitchers and such. And so it's not unusual for you to get in a conversation with these folks. And one of the guys turned around to me and was like, hey, listen, what did you get on that last pitch? And I said, whatever it was, 94, whatever. And he, we just kind of struck up a conversation and we were chatting. And by the end of it, he was like, I work for Boras Corp, Scott Boras, who, if you're not familiar with baseball, is, in my opinion, the best agent in all of sports, but definitely the best agent in baseball. And he's the best agent in baseball just because most people hate him, which I think is a pretty good tracker of being good at what you do, because everyone thinks he's money hungry and all that stuff, which you kind of have to be in this industry anyway. It's crazy the pass that teams get when it comes to all this, just because the big number. If you're so anti-Scott for trying to get more money out of teams, you got to be anti-team for fighting back, because they can afford it, but they want to keep it in their pocket. So it's kind of a catch-22. It's kind of a weird spot to just be so anti an agent, but I digress. It's for another day. But we get into conversation with Scott. We go out and meet with them and stuff like that. And he asked me how my draft process was. And I thought it was very good. And I was like, I was happy with it, but we're not necessarily happy with where my agent landed afterwards, his own professional decision, but maybe we don't want to go with. And so I'm kind of a free agent at the time, so to speak. Scott, we walked me through kind of his process with the draft and how he would have approached, what was going on. And he had, funny enough, the Red Sox had the 24th overall pick, I believe, and he had that guy. And that guy coincidentally signed for $300,000, pretty much more than his slot, and I signed for $300,000 less on mine. And so you look at it and you're like, oh wow, did Scott just went and got more money, which was my money. I feel like I should be able to get that. But what Scott eventually led me to believe was like, hey, listen, you got to know the team. Boston Red Sox are not looking to save a bunch of money in the draft. $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 to the Boston Red Sox isn't very much money to them. And so they're not there to save, in that regard. And if you knew a lot about the Red Sox, you would know that they're going to ask you that. But for the most part, they're just going to pay you slot. If you're good with slot, they'll pay you slot. If they think you're really worth it, maybe they'll go over, which they did for the 24th pick, which is a guy by the name of Devin Marrero, who was this huge big name shortstop out of Arizona State, who I think was at some points talked about in the top 5 picks, but I don't think he hit so well his junior year, and I think that brought him back down. But so he ended up signing for over slot, but he's like, you could have, if you just said no and you say I want slot, it was very likely that they just take you and they pay you slot. And looking back, it's like you're trusting your advisor or agent, or whatever you want to call him at that time, to lead you in the right direction when it comes to how you get drafted, which team is looking at you, what do they typically look like, what do they typically go for, are they, the draft history, do they typically pay slot, do they not, do they always try to go under, so on and so forth. And you realize the not only the business behind, being selected and such, and giving a quote unquote number that you want to be at, but understanding the team dynamics and understanding the draft history of each of the team and understanding kind of exactly where you would go and what you should ask for, and just not having that basic understanding. I'm not saying it did, but not having that basic understanding could have cost me $300,000.